I felt heartbroken. I felt completely abandoned, detached from God and everything I had been taught about faith. I then had to make a decision. Do I remain in this religion and be, recorded as a sinner, even though someone harmed me, or do I leave? I was praying for years that I would see the error of my ways and I would understand how they had come to their conclusion. I don't understand why I feel so much pain about being raped, and yet the elders are creating a new narrative and saying that I sinned and I'm unclean. When I was taught what the role of a wife was, what the role of women was, I did not find it attractive or appealing whatsoever. I should not have to downplay or shrink my intelligence, my brilliance, my essence, really, just to simply get married, end up cooking and cleaning for a man. I believe that women need to be well resourced. We need to understand and accept that money does not come from men. It's a renewable resource. It is not masculine, skeptical, cynical as a woman to generate money on your own terms and use that money so that you have options. And that way I can't be contained, I can't be controlled. There is no carrot or stick. I didn't ever really fit into a lot of the black business communities. Obviously the space I'm in is not beauty. I don't do pop culture. I'm not doing music. I don't act. I'm not in fitness. So in a way, sometimes there isn't really a space for me in a lot of black business communities and black creative communities sometimes, because that's not the space that I'm in.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Coffee No Cream podcast. My name is Erin Braxton and I am the host of Coffee No Cream. Here on Coffee No Cream, we are unapologetically dedicated to Black women, and we share what I like to call Coffee No Cream moments, those things that happen to us Black women in business and in life just because we are Black women. Today, I have a good one. I have the unpunishable woman, Ashanti, here to talk to us about being unpunishable. Now, I started watching Ashanti on TikTok many, many months ago. This woman is so wise, I think, for her age. I think she is just a real advocate for being what she calls an unpunishable woman, which is a woman who is regulated, resourced, and rooted. She is an advocate for women. And I knew when I first saw her, this woman is so wise for her age. She is just speaking life into women who want to be successful and be independent, how to have your own money, how to live a life where you're happy with or without a man. And I mean, she just is just brilliant, great information, great conversation. I'm so excited. We were trying to get something together many months ago, and we finally touched base just the other day, and she is here with us today. So super excited about that. So stick around. You do want to hear this conversation. Before we get into it though, guys, please like, please share, please hype the video, share this with anyone you feel needs it. We've got the Facebook group. We have got the free resource tool, coffeenocream.com/free. All those links are below in the description box or in the show notes if you're listening on Spotify. And so let's just get into it. So welcome, Ashanti. How are you today?
I am doing really, really well. It's so good to be here with you. Thanks for having me on.
I'm so excited. You guys don't even know what you're about to see right now. This woman is so brilliant. I have been watching you for months on TikTok just blow up, and so intelligent, so I don't want to say articulate because that's such a, like, you know how we get called articulate, but she is, like, in the way she gives these reads with the British accent. You guys are in for a treat. We've got the unpunishable woman today. And I just want to start off and ask you, tell us what an unpunishable woman is for those of us who don't know what that is, who don't know you yet.
Yeah, that's such a good question. So an unpunishable woman is a woman that is rooted in herself. She knows who she is. She's regulated, so she understands how to regulate her nervous system, and she's resourced. So those are the three key pillars, really, that make up an unpunishable woman. And the reason why it's important to be an unpunishable woman is that as women, we do live in a world with systems of power that do punish us when we do not obey invisible contracts that we've been sold often from girlhood, and we've been promised that obeying those invisible contracts will keep us safe, that will keep us protected, that we will belong, and that we will be chosen, essentially, usually by men in the end. So that's why it's so important for women to learn how to be rooted, regulated, and resourced, so that we can make different decisions without having to be punished in the process.
Okay. So tell us how you got here. Like, tell me the story of Ashanti, because I've heard them all. I've listened to you. But tell us how you got here, because again, you are so young to me. When I think back to when I was your age, 14, 15 years ago, I wasn't there. You know what I'm saying? You know, and maybe I was, and I'm just not giving myself, but you do such a wonderful job of empowering women. So how did you find this path? Because I think so many of us, Black women especially, are trying to figure out our purpose, which is a big loaded word, right?
Yeah.
Yes. You know?
I think it's an interesting one. I think leaving religion 5.5, 6 years ago was a key catalyst in me having to confront and address the invisible contracts that were governing my life. So I grew up as one of Jehovah's Witnesses. It's a very particular and specific religion, which has very, again, specific roles for men and women. And growing up in that religion, and also being an adult in that religion and being single, taught me a lot about systems of power, what they expect of women, and the difference between what you're taught and what your lived reality often is. Okay. And my experience of leaving religion unexpectedly, because it was never a plan for me. I never saw a life outside of that religion. My entire identity was consumed wholeheartedly, full-heartedly in my faith and my religion. Okay. And so when I had to leave the religion unexpectedly, it forced me to grow up and it forced me to mature. And I realized in that moment how much about life that I really didn't know, quite frankly, how much of myself I had self-abandoned, how much I had outsourced my identity, my self-value, my self-worth. Because when that was removed from me, I literally didn't even know who I was. It did feel like a crisis, so to speak, because everything in my life and every security, every certainty was in what I was taught about God, but equally what I was then taught about my value in his eyes within that religion. And when I, realized and learned there is a massive difference between what is taught and what happens to you as a woman in reality, I just had to grow up. That's the only way I can explain it. It forced like a system reset in order for me to survive that period of my life.
Can you talk about what it was that made you just wake up?
Oh my goodness. I mean, look, I realized I didn't know myself. So bearing in mind, I'd spent years of my life reading and studying the Bible. So one of the things I will say about that religion, especially back in the day, it's probably changed a bit now, but back in the day, you would study the scriptures. And so you would read the Bible at least once a year, end to end. And it was something that I actually thoroughly enjoyed doing. I loved the research element. I loved the history element, all of the things. And so in all my entire life up until the age of about 32, I sincerely believed that everything we are instructed to do was based upon the scriptures. That was what I was taught. And just before I turned 30, I was raped, unfortunately. And the process within the religion is that you go to the elders. And when I went to the elders, they took me through what is called a judicial process. And I was punished, essentially. Now, the terminology they use internally is that I was disciplined. But essentially, they disbelieved me and said that, look, we need to decide whether you are clean enough to remain in the congregation. And for me as a young woman, having abstained I had abstained.
Right.
I had done all of the things that you were meant to do. I was a good daughter, a good sister, a good member of the congregation. I was not on the edge of the congregation. I didn't live a double life. It was the best way I can describe it. It was a heartbreak. I felt heartbroken. I felt completely abandoned, detached from God, and everything I had been taught about faith and identity in relation to that, it would completely destabilized. It changed me on a cellular level. The trauma, the pain, the emotional pain, the spiritual pain. It changed me on a cellular level, and I then had to make a decision. Do I remain in this religion and be, recorded as a sinner, even though someone harmed me, or do I leave? And of course, leaving had consequences because my entire life was in that religion, friends, family, etc. And I'd never lived outside of the religion either. So if I left, it would require me to build a new life. But equally, it might mean that my family members may stop speaking to me depending upon the decision that the elders were going to take. Because one of the disciplines is that you can be what in mainstream Christianity would term excommunicated. But the consequence of that back then would be that your family could not speak to you. And so there were some important kind of decisions I had to make about, am I going to honor my dignity, or am I going to obey these invisible contracts in order to be accepted and be deemed to be worthy of God's forgiveness for a sin that I don't believe I even committed?
Right.
Yeah.
So how did your family respond to you?
I'm incredibly fortunate that our relationship now is the strongest it's probably ever been.
Wow. Okay.
But there was no guarantee of that. I understood when I made these decisions, about leaving, that I'd already gone through a grieving process already. And so I had prepared myself for a life whereby my family may not have contact with me, may not talk to me, or the relationship would materially change on an emotional level. I'm incredibly fortunate that has not happened, but I prepared myself for that mentally when I made the decision to leave.
Yeah. Okay, so you leave.
Yes.
You start, whether you knew it at the time or not. I'm assuming you probably didn't, because that's the way things go.
Yes.
That you're constructing, you're creating this life as an unpunishable woman.
Yes.
So what does that look like? I mean, when you first left, because I mean, at this point, and I don't know with Jehovah Witnesses how. I have a really good friend actually who's a Jehovah's Witness, and she's very successful.
Yes.
So you're obviously in your career at this time. I know you owned a business at once upon a time. So tell us a little bit about that, and then how we're transitioning.
Oh, my goodness. So, and that's even the decisions I made even on a professional level from that year onwards. If I wasn't traumatized, I probably wouldn't have made some of those decisions at all, to be honest. So after that, in that year, I went on to open a coffee shop. So one of the things, I'd always wanted to do was open a coffee shop. So I opened the first independent coffee shop in the area I grew up in for something like 25 years. Very poor decision.
Yeah.
Because if anyone knows anything about the coffee shop business, bricks and mortar businesses, incredibly hard, right, to get off the ground and take them to a profitable place. And so, fortunately, I had business interests and pursuits outside of my religion, which again, I've always probably looking back broken the rules, because in that religion before you weren't allowed to pursue higher education, but I went to university. It was a necessity for me. And then I've always been interested in business. And so fortunately, even with leaving the religion, I had something to occupy me. And in many ways, it kept me focused. I could kind of almost freeze the pain from the whole leaving religion thing and focus wholeheartedly on running that coffee shop business. And so that's what I started to do. And then, of course, the pandemic came along and I made a decision to shut that coffee shop because I knew I could make more money going back to consulting, which is what I was doing before I opened the coffee shop. And so I made sure that I kind of transitioned back into consulting.
What kind of consulting? Because it's so funny, because I've been on this everybody's a consultant. I consult, right? But I know, and as Black women, especially, we are so diverse. We are
Yes.
so amazing. And a lot of people are like, you can consult. I'm to consult, and you're just going to go out
Yeah.
here and consult. And so what kind of consulting do you do? I know you're
So
into
I
sales.
sell I sell cultural transformation and strategy essentially to corporate organizations. So that's
Nice.
always been my thing. The modalities that we tend to offer once we're inside that organization is training, coaching, advisory work. I tend to do a lot of C-suite briefings, looking over a lot of the culture strategies that they want to develop, learning and development strategies, that kind of thing is really that's my bread and butter.
Yeah, yeah. So this is what I was going to ask you that it slipped my mind. So where are you mentally with, like, can I ask you with your faith?
Yeah.
Because this is a big one, with Black women especially. I feel something's happening
Yeah.
with us, and not necessarily with just Jehovah's Witnesses, but as well in the Black church, the Christian church, Black Christians in here in the U.S.
Yes.
Where are you on that?
Yeah, so that's a good question. There's two things I'll say in terms of where I feel, what I feel right now. I do still believe in a God. And I know that's very unpopular to say these days,
Yeah.
but I do still believe in a God, but I would not regard myself as religious. And it's so funny, when I was one of Jehovah's Witnesses, there's a very clear delineation between a practicing Jehovah's Witness and someone who's not. And so that's why for me, I always say I'm not religious, because I am not actively practicing any religion, right? I'm not a member of a church officially or any religion, but I do still believe in a God. I think also where I'm at, and obviously this plays into my work, I do believe that religion is a system of power. And I think religion and spirituality and faith are different things. I think religions that operate in an organized way, have a legal entity, they are systems of power, and ultimately they are there to retain their power over people. And a lot of rank and file members of religions don't realize that, because when you are brought into that organization, any organization, the angle is usually about your faith, right? And you and God, but you are unaware that it's an entire organization that operates like any other secular organization. It's registered with the government. There are tax benefits to them. They have a lot of money. And I think the Black church, obviously here in America, you can see more of that on the outside, but actually in the religion I came from, you can be an everyday publisher and completely unaware about the level of wealth that religion actually has, and you might be struggling day to day yourself.
Yeah.
And of course, and so for me, I do believe that religions operate like systems of power, especially when they are male led, and when the leadership and authority is male led, and where women have no voice either in any of the ways. So for example, the judicial process I went through, there's never any kind of there's not a feedback box, right? So bearing in mind it's a religion where the majority of the members are women, which means that the majority of the members are women who go through this judicial process, but nobody's coming to check what the experience was like. Was it done fairly, ethically? What the impact on your mental health is? There's just no check and balance on that, right? And so you end up as a woman being alone in a room with men, being questioned about whether or not your rapist ejaculated on you. And nobody is checking for this. Nobody cares. There's no consequences, nothing, right? That is allowed. It's permissible. And in fact, if you do try to escalate, which is quite difficult, quite frankly, if you want to complain, that's not a thing. You are navigating a system of power and a system of hierarchy. That's what you end up navigating, which is very different in reality to what you're sold, which is that it's all about your relationship with God. He's loving, he's there for you, he cares for you. But actually with something like that, which is very real and has a real impact on your mental health, your sanity, like I say, your dignity, there is no check and balance whatsoever. So for me, I'm not interested or inclined in joining a religion to have to navigate another system of power in that way.
Yep. Did you go to therapy after that?
I did. It was absolutely necessary eventually. I think at first I just thought I'll figure this out, because having gone through a process where you, like I say, you're sitting before men who are telling you that they can make a decision as to whether you're clean enough to remain in the congregation.
Unbelievable.
When you've been told that, this is how God sees you, right?
Yeah.
You're the one who's done something wrong in God's eyes. I did not have the bandwidth, quite frankly, to go and speak to somebody else about what had happened to me. In fact, for about 2 to 3 years, I spent most of the time praying for humility, because based on my Bible knowledge, I really didn't see what the scriptural grounds were for me to be punished when somebody had harmed me. And so I was praying for years that I would see the error of my ways, and I would understand how they had come to their conclusion in terms of the way they treated me and the decision that was actually made. So I did not even really process the original injury for years, because my entire attention and focus was on being accepted in this religion as clean. So it was about 3 years really until the first time I really went into trauma therapy and had to sit for the first time and grieve what had originally happened to me.
So did you talk to the elders or the men of the church because your attacker was a member of the church?
But you have to. So, and this is what you're encouraged to do. And it's ironic, because even to this day, if you speak to members of that religion, they'll say you did the right thing. Right? So the culture and the process is that anything that happens like that in your life, you need to go and speak to the elders. And ideally what they sell you is that the elders are shepherds, and so they're there to shepherd you, right? And so the idea is that they will help you, comfort you, but that's not what happened to me at all.
Yeah, obviously.
That's not what happened to me at all.
Yeah. So this is something I think we struggle with, because, I was raised as a Christian. I consider myself a Christian, but I'm spiritual. I'm not religious, but am I a Christian? So I feel like I'm kind of on the fence these days, right? I used to be very involved in my church. You see things, things, and you're just like, nah, so when you were making the decision, you said before you were attacked, you had no, you weren't even thinking about it.
Not at all. In fact, even when this all happened, I had no intentions of leaving. It was really because of the shock and the doubling down that the organization did around taking me through a judicial and disciplining me, even though I hadn't done anything wrong. It was the fact that my mental health had sunk so low. I'd gone to a point where I could barely function some days. And so I thought, this can't be correct. I don't believe, it's either this is a very cruel God, and I'm experiencing his wrath, even though I don't think I deserve it, but I'm not sure, because God knows all things. So I must have done something, even though I don't know what it was. It was at a point where I thought maybe I fell asleep during the attack, because I don't remember consenting. I didn't invite this person to do this to me.
Yeah.
So maybe I fell asleep. Literally, I thought I was losing my mind.
Yeah.
And so I had even when they disciplined me and they said, look, this is the consequences. What happens is there's 3 levels to the discipline, and they will put you on a review process. And so for 3 months they were reviewing my behavior, and they were looking for me to show that I was repentant for what I had done. And so then at the end of the 3 months, you go back to the elders, and they basically tell you what their thoughts are. And when I got there, bearing in mind I was barely getting out of bed some days, and I still was going to all of the meetings, I was still going out on the ministry, so I was doing all the worship activities that were expected of me. Okay, I got to the review meeting after 3 months, and they said, you haven't demonstrated enough spiritual maturity. And it was at that point, at the 3-month line, I remember a voice in my body. It was an all over voice that said, you need to leave and get to safety now. This has gone too far. So it was really in that moment when, even when I'd done everything I could in the midst of fresh trauma, they were saying, this isn't good enough. Right. And that's when I decided, begrudgingly. It wasn't like I was looking forward to it. I was happy about it. I didn't know what the next steps would be for me. But I remember that voice coming through saying, you need to leave and get to safety. And it was another, I'd say, 10 months before I stopped going to the meetings entirely.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, and you answered before I could even ask, like, when you decide that you're, okay, this is what I've been doing, this is what I've known my entire life, and you make the decision, like, I'm not feeling this anymore, right? I've got to go. It happened in a moment. You said you felt you heard a voice, you felt it in your spirit, you knew that, but it still took you 10 months. Yeah. Yeah, because I can just hear some of my friends talking about it. Like the way we talk is not the way our grandmothers talked.
No.
No.
And it is because there's a logistical unraveling. At the time I was the person in the family that dropped everyone to the meetings. So I had to figure that part out because it significantly obviously impacted their routine and how they got to the meeting, right? Mm-hmm. And so I was trying to figure that out. And then, of course, remember, I had been taught that if you leave this religion, you will die at Armageddon. You will lose God's approval. You lose this global brotherhood that is ever so loving, apparently. Mm-hmm. So that is a massive change. I had to think about, well, how am I going to survive? I knew I could survive money-wise and whatnot, but how was I going to survive as a human being? How was I going to square that fear of dying at Armageddon? What was I going to do around that, right? And the truth is, at that point in time, I hadn't completely lost any and all regard for God. So I still cared about what he thought of me, whether or not I would indeed be living a life that he would approve of, right? Mm-hmm. And so I needed to figure that out for 10 months. And I think a part of me, like I said, I was still praying for humility. I was praying to God to show me where I had gone wrong. Because if this is my haughtiness, if this is my misstep, I need you to reveal it to me so that I can work through what feels like a deep intrinsic trauma and pain. I don't understand why I feel so much pain about being raped, and yet the elders are creating a new narrative and saying that I sinned and I'm unclean. I could not reconcile those two things, and so I think I spent that 10 months trying to figure that out and see, are you wrong? Are you the one that's lacking in humility? You must be the one who doesn't understand scripture. And so I would spend time reading the Bible. I would research everything I could find on rape in the Bible. Like, it was obsessive for me to understand where I had gone wrong in my estimation of God and also this religion.
Yeah. And I think that's the thing, like, what you said was, I still believe in a God. I mean, I definitely believe in God. I still believe. I mean, I definitely do. I actually feel like I'm closer to God when I haven't been in the church. Like, I know that sounds crazy to some of the listeners, but it's just been my experience. But anywho, okay, let's talk about why you're so like celebrity over here on TikTok, because I mean, the fact that you went, what do you have, like 200,000 subscribers now? And you started in, what, you said
mid-September 2025.
Oh, yeah. It's good, you guys. It's good. It's good. So, let's talk about being an unpunishable woman. And I want to talk about your decisions to not be married, your decisions to not have children, because I'm not married, I don't have children, and I'm older than you, and I feel, and I've said this before, it's not like I just tried not to have children. I've always been very into my career. I never really tried to have children, never really tried to meet someone. I was more interested in what was going on, I think, in my life than I was in finding my person, you know. Yes. And then you meet them, and then they disappoint you, and then you're hurt, and then you go away, and then you try again. But but tell us about your decision to not do that, because I know I was just actually talking to a friend of mine whose mother didn't even want her to go to law school. She went to Columbia Law, right? Then she went to work for Google as a patent attorney. I mean, very successful. But her mother just was like, that's too much. Like, you need to, go have kids. You need to, and I mean, it was crazy. She's like, you guys better get behind me and support me because I'm doing it, right?
Yes.
And she ultimately got married and has a beautiful family and all the things. But talk to us about your decision.
Well, the roots in that again are based in my upbringing in the religion. So there are very distinct roles. Well, first of all, there's only there's two things you can do as a woman in that religion: get married and be somebody's wife, and go on to have children if that's something you choose to do, or you are a single sister. And I say that because that's the way you're referred to when you're a single sister all the time. It's that single sister, the single sister over there, which used to annoy me chronically. And so you only have two roles. And I grew up in a time where the worst thing that could happen to me on a Sunday morning if we went to the Kingdom Hall and the talk was about marriage, because it used to be when I was growing up a 60-minute talk. I kid you not, 44 minutes of that 60 minutes would be spent talking about women submitting to men. And when I was taught what the role of a wife was, what the role of women was, I did not find it attractive or appealing whatsoever. And so I just always knew that obviously I never thought I would leave the religion, and therefore I would never get married. And I was okay with that. I was very settled in that. I wanted to retain my bodily autonomy, my independence, my freedom of thought, and I quite frankly did not want to have to cook and clean for a man. I had no interest in doing that. And so even in the religion, I just had no plans, made no efforts whatsoever to get married. And also, I should also add that in that religion, you don't date. It's always courtship with a view to marriage. And so there's no in between. You're a single woman, or you're courting, and then you're married. That's how it works. And so when I saw from the inside out how apparently God sees women and their role, especially in a household where you're literally, they'd have ridiculous things like they'd say, a wife who respects her husband, if you're going on a car journey, literally, if you're on a car journey and he's taking the wrong route, out of respect, you allow him to figure it out first. You wouldn't just go and ask somebody for directions, all that kind of foolishness. And I used to just think, this is a nonsense. I always understood that I was a whole being, and that there was nothing lacking in me, quite frankly, and that I should not have to downplay or shrink my intelligence, my brilliance, my essence, really, just to simply get married, end up cooking and cleaning for a man, have children that I'd have to do most of the work with. I just did not want to do it at all. And so the singleness thing for me is not new. It was very much in my upbringing, based on what I saw of the lives of the women living around me. Now, what I would say is I was always a bit of an outlier because I grew up in a generation, I think, in that religion where there were, I would say, maybe one or two generations above us. I'm 37. They were women who, less of them got married. Let's just put it that way, especially if they were black. And so I grew up witnessing women who were unhappy, were sometimes miserable, sometimes depressed, lonely, and also you're in an environment where, as I say, 6% of the women want to get married. So when you're going out to dinners, that is the entire conversation, is how they're going to get married, why they're not married, who's courting, who's not courting. I found it terribly boring, right? And unstimulating in general, like to talk about. But that is the obsession, because there's nothing else you can do. You can't hold a position of authority in that religion. They discourage higher education. So what else will you do as a woman, especially if you want to experience some validation, some recognition, because you're not going to get it because of career. Yeah, the only time in that religion probably for a woman that you will be celebrated is if you get engaged, if you marry, and then if you go on to have children. There is no other opportunity for you to be truly celebrated in terms of womanhood, in terms of non-worship related things. Does that make sense? Like this, because we didn't celebrate birthdays, we don't celebrate Christmases, so there's no individual celebration happening, and you are discouraged from pursuing other things. So the only and probably most significant time of external validation comes from in getting engaged and getting married and then going on to have children.
Right. So you're not doing none of that.
No.
You're you're unpunishable. You're very successful. So give the viewers an example of your unpunishable life, like what that means in
Yeah.
like layman's terms, like rooted, resourced.
Yes.
What's the other one?
Regulated.
Regulated. Yes. So, but give us an example of what that looks like, because you be spitting facts and doing reads, and the one about the wig install and investing money in yourself or something just had me on the floor. You probably don't even remember, but I was like, no, no. So tell us what that means,
For me,
because this is important, guys. This is like important stuff, because especially as Black women, a lot of us desire to be married. We desire to be partnered. We desire to be married and partnered with another Black male. And there's a shortage of those going around, right? So if we're not willing to cross racial boundaries and try something different, which I think we're becoming more open to, you know, there comes a time where we have to make a decision on, you know, can we be happy if we don't get that, you know, and can we take care of ourselves if we don't? Because I was talking to my friend who's going through a separation right now, and this woman is successful, and she's concerned about, she said to me, yeah, I can pay the bills. I can. And I'm thinking, oh, really, girl, that was a concern for you? Because I of course you can. Of course you can, you know, but tell us what it means really to be unpunishable in the day to day in your life.
yeah. So for me, a lot of that has been around one, following my desires, right? And on a day-to-day basis, I have an environment physically that is peaceful, that is quiet, that is structured as well, because I need a bit of both. I travel wherever I want to, when I want to. And that was a thing when I was in the religion. It was like you couldn't really travel too much if you weren't going to your local congregation. They'd say, where are you? And my thing was, I don't have kids. I'm not married. I can go where I want to go.
Right.
Right? When I love cars. I bought a kind of what you would call, I guess, it was a Jeep. And I remember I pulled up to drop something off to an elder, and he said, why have you got that car? You're not married and you don't have kids. I said, am I meant to be on a scooter just because I don't have a husband and children? And I think for me, on a day-to-day basis, about really following my desires, making sure that I have the things I want in my life. I don't work harder than I need to or than I want to. I had a cleaner for years, which, you know, people were like, why do you need a cleaner? Because I want one. That's why.
Yeah.
I make sure that my life is comfortable. For starters, I make sure it's peaceful, that I'm very much a desire-led person now. And also, I think another important thing probably that I talk about a lot on TikTok is money. I believe that women need to be well-resourced. We need to understand and accept that money does not come from men. It's a renewable resource. It is not masculine, skeptical, cynical as a woman to generate money on your own terms and use that money so that you have options, you have leverage, you have freedom, you have choices. That's what I'm really, really focused on in my life, is making sure I'm well-resourced. And that way I can't be contained, I can't be controlled. There is no carrot or stick. Anyone, but most certainly not a man, can hold over my head, because my identity, my value, my sense of safety is not in a man. It is in myself.
Wow. How do you respond? How do you encourage, like, I'm going to say the, you know, the sprinkle people who, you know, are looking for that? Because I've never been that kind of woman, but, you know, I think men expect women to be that kind of woman, but I don't know that it necessarily pays off.
Yeah, I think, look, one thing I have learned since coming on TikTok and talking about money and women, and there are people who are very attached for a lot of reasons to that kind of manifesto, that kind of, you know, approach to life, which is that you look for a man with money and, you know, you expect him to be a provider, and in exchange you are going to submit to him and you are going to serve domestically. You are going to give of your body, essentially, in exchange for that money. It's not my personal worldview and way of looking at things. For me personally, I've long realized since being on TikTok, those people can't be helped or converted, and that's okay. They usually are quite entrenched in that attitude, and quite frankly are willing to deal with the trade-offs of allowing a man to be your main source of income. They're willing to do it, and so it is what it is. Even though we can see from plenty of examples, evidence, research, data, that that's an incredibly precarious situation to put yourself in as a woman, not to have any of your own income. Women still choose to do it.
So for those who want, because this is because when I'm watching you, it's just like I'm like yes to everything, right? This is true, but we still, I mean, men and women want to get together, right?
Yes.
But you're just encouraging there's an intelligent way to go about it, right?
I believe so. I think that marriage is a system of power. It always has been. And I think that the smartest thing that a woman can do is negotiate her power before going into that system. I think if you're going into it with love and romance being at the forefront, I think that's a mistake. It's a folly, and it's not because I make the rules. It's just the way the system works, right? Most of the protections that women believe that they are accessing when they get married are protections that are set out by the law, not the man. And we see it all too often. If his affection, his attention, his desire for you disappears or dissipates, so does that money. Okay, and it's only because of the law, say you go through a proper divorce process, that you may or may not receive resources. And if you look at the actual stats, a lot of women, I think it's less than 20% of women in America actually get half the money, right? A lot of women actually go into poverty after divorce, depending upon their circumstances. And so those protections that women often think that they are accessing through marriage are not because of the man. It's the law who's created these laws around how a marriage is formed and then how it's dissolved, right? And so I think it's a complete myth that marriage itself, as in the man and the love part, is what is protecting you. It's not. It's a legal arrangement. That's what it is fundamentally, and that's what it's kind of always been.
So if I can ask you, because we don't get to know Ashanti on we know some stuff, but so how are you, because like I am very independent. I take care of myself. I own my own home. I have a car. I have property. I take care of myself, right? But I would still like to have a man if he's the right fit. I'm worried about being distracted in the wrong way, right? Yes. And that's always been my thing, right? But where are you on that? Like, do you feel like, are you just like, I don't want it?
At this point in time, I like life the way it is. And look, I've said this before, because I have, and I continue to try and unbound myself to what society says a woman should be. And for me, I am the authority on me. I decide what womanhood and femininity is for me. And so probably at best, for me to be able to still retain my brilliance, my essence, my energy, and not have to filter my thoughts and the way I think about life, the world, myself, I would only be able to, at best, partner with a man who's done that work in himself. Yeah. Because it just, otherwise we would be completely incompatible. It would be a complete nightmare for him, that's for sure. So it'd be a complete nightmare for him. And when I say this, sometimes people, what they're hearing is that I'm saying that there's no man that's intelligent enough. I'm not even talking about academic education. I'm talking about a sense of consciousness, a sense of connection to self, and somebody who understands that they are an imperfect human being and they're not a God and they're not my God. Right. And therefore, you do not inform what I think of myself and how I see myself. And so, in logistical terms, I don't think I'd ever live with a man. That's not something I'm interested in doing, is living with a man, that's for sure. I will never do more labor than I do now. Yes. Yeah. It's out the question. So I don't think I'd ever live with a man. And I don't see a necessity for marriage because it's a system of power. And the only circumstance in which I would initiate and require marriage is if I was giving birth to children, because I would absolutely want my children to enjoy the structural advantages of marriage. it isn't because I love the man. It will be because I understand the role marriage plays in social status, social enablement, social mobility, and I would want to give any children that I give birth to that structure and foundation in life, because it's not simply about how I feel about marriage, it's about the way the world treats them.
That's
as well.
true.
And I think when you are black, as a black woman, me personally, I am not looking to perpetuate some of those social stigmas and some of the social barriers that come from being an unmarried mother, being a single mother, for example. It's not for me. And so I recognize that the systems of power recognize marriage, and they treat you accordingly in the education system, in the healthcare system, for their future career. And so if I was going to give birth to my own children, I absolutely would require marriage, and I would strategically marry. I would not be marrying for love. Absolutely not. I would be marrying somebody who can bring that structure and match my structure and give those children the foundation that I think that they deserve. That is really the only circumstance under which I would consider marriage.
So smart. Those have been my biggest mistakes in dating, is I haven't been strategic. I'm like, oh, he's funny, he's fun. I told my dad one time, I said, yeah, Daddy, I could get married, but he can have his own house, and then I can just stay in my house and he can have his house. And he was like, don't do that. You can't do that. And I'm just like, why not?
Yeah.
So I love that setup. And somebody was talking about that. I saw somebody post about it on TikTok about having that arrangement. And I think that's...
The thing is, it is not actually a modern thing. I think people don't realize this whole thing about a couple sleeping in the same bed in the same house is actually relatively new. There are civilizations that have gone before where a husband and wife would not have had the same bedroom. They wouldn't have had the same quarters. And when you look at cultures whereby polygamy is quite common, etc., they weren't all sleeping in the same bed. They had their own tents, they had their own huts, they had their own quarters, depending on what class they were from. This whole phenomenon, because that's what it is, of sleeping in the same bed in the same house every single night as a married couple, and that being a litmus test of the health of your marriage, is actually quite modern and made up. It's a complete social construct entirely.
Yeah. And I mean, I think it's more common than people think that couples don't sleep together, for a myriad of reasons,
And it's one of the areas for me, like, I'm quite low tolerance on some of this stuff. That's why I said I would be a nightmare for a man, because I don't understand why I'm having to debate with you whether I need to sleep next to you every night. Like, that's just going to annoy me, quite frankly. I don't understand why we're having such a ridiculous conversation about the fact that you think that the health of our marriage is fundamentally, one of the fundamental pillars is whether or not I sleep next to you every night. To me, it would just annoy me.
Well, it goes back, I think, to also what you were saying about access to your body, because if I see another video about women who have separated or are trying to leave their husbands, they can't even take a shower. Every time they take a shower, here he is,
It annoys me chronically, I have to say. It does. And again, this is why I talked about a sense of consciousness and connection to self and dignity, because my thing is, when I observe men talking about this holistically, not every single individual man, of course, it's like they don't understand that dignity part. Like, the responses are all about, well, I'm married to be monogamous, not celibate. It's like, you do not have unfettered access to another human being's body for your own release. Because to me, unless it's mutual and reciprocal, unless it's defined by mutual pleasure, that's just gratification. So unless I'm experiencing pleasure every single time, that is gratification, because you are effectively using my body for your release. And I'm not bought in to the belief that that is a woman's fundamental...
No, that's very rare. We just, from friends of mine, I was traveling this week, past week, and we were talking about every single time for a woman, that's not even real.
It's not.
No.
It's not. So why are we doing this? My thing is, I should be enjoying it as much as you. And if that's not happening, I need to pull back on that. Thank you. You see, I would be a nightmare, as you can tell, Erin, because...
I would too.
Because it's just not going to work. Like, I need to be having as many orgasms as you.
Yeah, I would too. And I told my friend was trying to tell me, and I got a little defensive with him. I love him to death. He's married, newly married. I say 2 years ago, but he's in his mid-50s, and he's, and I have another guy in my life who's newly married in his 50s, and they always have so much advice. It's like, I love how these newly married men who got married in their 50s have so much love advice.
Yes.
It's like, give me a break. But I said something, I don't even know what the conversation was, and he said, well, Aaron, that's probably why you don't have a man. And I was just like, and then he went on to say, well, I think what you need, because da 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 da. And he said, and then now you're defensive. Now you see how you got defensive? I'm like, I'm defensive because I didn't ask you
Exactly
what I need. I didn't say I want a man right now, and this is my problem. I never said that. You just decided to put that on me. I mean, yes, if the right one comes, great. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, it's like it's assuming something's wrong with you.
Yeah. I mean, my thing is when people say this is why you don't have a man, again, I challenge the premise that I desire one. I challenge the premise that it is of more value than what I have now in the life I'm living now.
Right.
I challenge the very premise because I don't feel defensive about it. I'm like, yeah, that is why I don't have a man, because funny enough, I respect myself. So yeah, I'm okay with that actually. If that is the reason why a man which man? Are we talking about random men? Like, which man is it that I'm meant to be sad about that does not want me and does not desire me? And quite frankly, when it comes to who are we being chosen by and what are we being chosen for? And that's always my thing as well, because unless it's to be honored, cherished and respected, and like I say, unless there are orgasms on the table, I don't need to be chosen. Quite frankly, I simply do not need to be chosen, because what I'm seeing women be chosen for, it's not attractive to me.
Yeah.
So
I when I moved back, because I was in LA for years, and then I moved back to St. Louis in 21. And I ran into this guy from high school. Hadn't seen him for years. Never comments on any of my posts on Facebook. But I was just like, hey, what's up? Hey. And he's like, hey, we were chit-chatting. And he says to me, do you have a significant other? And I was like, no, why? He's like, well, I see your posts on Facebook, and it doesn't look like you're trying to run home to get home to anybody or anyone. Because I was doing a lot of traveling at that time. And I was like, okay, is that what you got from my... Just the weirdest stuff. I was like, dude, I haven't seen you since like 1992. Honestly, But that's what you got, is that I'm not married and I'm traveling the world. That sounds fabulous to me.
Exactly. And what are we, little girls?
Yeah.
Who's running home to anybody? Like, do I have a curfew after school? Like, for me, it's just utterly ridiculous because, and this is why I go back to that point, is that I love to enjoy people in their essence. I love to be in somebody's true energy, and I don't have a desire to change them. I also quite enjoy respecting people, right? And so it simply would not work if the general attitude is that a man comes along and sees me as a woman and thinks that I need to be corrected, guided to my ultimate purpose, and led. I'm the wrong woman for all that, because I found myself. I know myself. There is no higher purpose that I can only achieve through a man's eyes, for example, at all.
So let's talk about your career, because you're obviously extremely successful, and tell us about how you got into what you got into, and how because you probably worked for someone at some point, and now you work for yourself, which is the goal. We know everybody cannot.
Yes.
And that's okay. But, for those who are interested, because it sounds quite fascinating what you do.
Yeah, I think, first of all, I think you make a really good point. And I think for single women, I think actually entrepreneurship or independent contractor freelancer life is not for all single women, because we already operate outside of these systems of power, and there's a lack of structural support for single women as it is. And I actually think it can often be the smarter choice for a lot of women, particularly as they're aging, if they're single, to have a job. I have to be quite honest and enjoy the benefits that come with that job. Be smart with your money and make sure that as you age, if you choose to retire, you are still well resourced. And I think this is a very important point. If you are single, entrepreneurship is not for everyone, right? Because there is no safety net outside of some of these traditional employment structures. But for me, I did initially go into financial compliance, so corporate compliance, worked for the big banks in London, worked for the Ombudsman Service in banking, and then I did decide to go independent as a consultant. A lot of that was about me wanting to make more money. I found the salary restrictive. You're getting paid once a month and it's a set amount, and I believed that I could earn more money independently. And so that's what I've been doing now for 10 years, is selling my services to corporate organizations. And like I say, it comes with its highs and lows. You've got to be very resilient. That much is true. And there is no safety net, ultimately. No. That's the reality. And so I have the risk appetite for it. But I will say at 37, I've always already, over the last few years, I've been thinking, if I want to be work optional, for example, by the time I'm 41, that's kind of my age, I want to be work optional. I need to start making different choices from now, quite frankly. And so that's exactly what my focus is now, is I'm thinking now about 10, 15, 20 years down the line, what resources do I want to have in place as a woman?
Yeah. Gosh. How did you transition from working for someone into doing your own thing? Like, how did you make that move?
It was quite, what's the word? I went cold turkey, but I was young, right? So I was 25, I think. So, a little bit reckless, quite frankly. And I had made some decent decisions. I already owned a property. The mortgage was very small. So I'd made some decent decisions at the point at which I decided I'm going to leave. But nonetheless, I went off and I had to just kind of figure it out, essentially, as I went along.
I was reckless too. I mean, my viewers know, like, I've been through bankruptcy, foreclosure. I've been through all the things. And, you're young, it's like, okay, but, I just felt like I had to do that. Like I had to do that. And, whatever, it makes you stronger. It makes you, it makes you better, But
there is an element of that I am taming, like I say, at the moment. I think you're 37 now, I moved to New York, and that was something I always wanted to do.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about that too.
Yeah. Now is the time to start thinking, I think, in terms of infrastructure for 10 years, 20 years time. And so I am in a different season in terms of the way I'm thinking about money in particular.
Yeah. So you moved to New York from London?
Yes.
Okay. Like a lot of Black women are trying to get out of America. You come to America. And New York is a fabulous place. I mean, New York is... There's no other city like it. But that's a scary move,
It wasn't for me.
No?
It was not. Honestly, I shed some tears in the cab from my mum's house, because I left from my mum's house that morning to get on the flight. I shed some tears, but it was because it was like a shedding. A genuine shedding in my nervous system, because I knew that I was inviting new experiences into my life, and it was the right time. It was needed. I deserved it. I was doing what I really wanted to do, and I was kind of very much shedding the roles that I had played for my entire life before that point. So it didn't feel like a scary decision, but it felt significant for sure.
Oh yeah. So how long have you been there?
So it was a year in April, so I'm now like 14, 15 months in now.
And you love it?
I love New York. And I have to say this, I don't believe there was anywhere else I could have started Unpunishable. It certainly would not have been, the community would not have been what it has been if I'd started this in London. There are different dynamics, I think, about being a Black woman in London, especially because Unpunishable is not about aesthetics. So I don't do makeup, I don't do fashion. I am not very aesthetic to look at, right? I just show up, I don't wear makeup, my hair's natural. It's a very different environment, and I don't think I would have been able to have grown the community this organically, but this rapidly, if I was doing it from the UK.
Really?
Sure. Not at all. And Black American women have been, from the beginning, key, parts of the community.
Yeah.
Like just from the beginning, because I didn't even have personal social media. So when I was literally sitting here when I first logged in and made an account on TikTok, and so I was already on the US algorithm. It wasn't
Okay.
even on the UK one, right? And
Right.
so it was Black American women initially, and then it's women from South Africa, Brazil, West Africa, all over the world started to join the community. And so I do believe that it is the right place for this season of my life.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not a big glam girl. Like, I like a greasy lip. I don't do the lashes.
Yeah.
I'm natural, you know what I'm saying, hair and everything like that. So I get it. I just think people appreciate the authenticity, like, because you're just so real. And when you come on, it's just like, God dang, like,
I'm not
wow.
done up, that's for sure. I'm not done up at all. And the thing is, I think I said this on a live the other day, like the amount of wig companies in my DMs, like
Oh, are you serious?
at this point, they're like, you
Wow.
can have the wig for free because they're like, are you sure you don't want to put a wig on?
No.
So that's really interesting. And the amount of women, I will say this, I do think that Black American women obviously look after themselves,
Oh, yeah.
okay, and invest in their appearance, etc. And so I do get a lot of Black American women saying, why do you show up online without any makeup on? It was there was a period of time where Black American women just did not understand why I didn't wear makeup, why I didn't wear shapewear, why I wasn't doing my hair. But I think people have gotten used to me now.
Yeah.
But this is how I feel comfortable. This is how I feel comfortable. And yeah, this is how I feel comfortable. I can't be any other way. And actually, I probably wouldn't turn the camera on. If I had to go and put makeup on and do my hair, I would not show up online at all.
Oh,
That's
I
the
say
truth.
that. I say that too. I mean, my makeup routine is I do a one of those crayon eye, you can't even see. It's like a natural crayon
Yes.
eyeshadow, some mascara, some eyeliner, and a lip gloss. Like, I am so basic, and people be like, one of my friends, she's a model, not no shit, she's a model, and she's just like, you could be more sexy, and I'm just like, yeah, it's not me. And like, to see me in real life when I have my fro out, I'm 5'9.5". I'm not a little woman,
Yes.
so all that to me, with all that glam, it's fun, for a photo shoot or something like
Yes.
that, but I just don't do it. I would never come in here, like, everything is set up, I just sit down and hit
Yes.
record. I just
Exactly.
can't put on eyelashes. I can't do all that.
Well, you know what? I have to say, with time, because I've had to really work on my relationship with my body and my appearance, quite frankly. And being online has been quite challenging from that perspective because you get all the comments, right? And the bigger the community, the further your reach. And so there'll always be periods of time where I see an influx in my DMs and my comments about the way I look. But what I will say is one thing I probably have an intrinsic knowing about is that to the point around sexiness and beauty, that is within me. That's not something that's on the outside, right? It's an essence, it's an energy. And now that I'm 37, I can acknowledge, especially because I've decided, I've left the old religion where you can't really say these kind of things because obviously you're not trying to be sexy in that religion as a
Yeah.
woman at all. But I know I'm sexy.
Yeah.
But it's not because of the outside. And usually when people are in my presence, and this is gender irrelevant, they feel that essence and energy. I don't have to put makeup on or wear a wig or straighten my hair in order to wield that energy. And actually quite a lot of the time I know that if I did, I could, if I wanted to, right? I could play that game, but it's not really me. And
No.
I really do enjoy the fact that if people see me in real life on a Tuesday morning, a Saturday, I look exactly the same. It's
The
not
same.
catfish.
Yes.
People aren't going to say, oh my goodness, you look so different on a Tuesday morning. No, I look exactly the same. I
Yeah.
do.
When I first talked to you several months ago and we got on that Zoom, it's like your personality is like, you're on there giving us the goods, you're this, but when when you're having a conversation, it's like your face lights up. When it's your eye, I was like, oh, she's so cute, because you were just like, like a different person. So yeah, a lot of times people just have to be, and when you're on here, people, they feel like they know you, and they know you to a certain degree, but they don't really know you, right?
Yes.
So
Yes.
people just, it's just
Well,
like,
some of the things obviously I talk about, there is a distinct difference. You know, if I did meet the beauty standard in and outside of the black community, quite frankly, my words would be taken differently. You know, that's truthful. I observe other, content creators and individuals who share online. And if you do meet the beauty standard, you can say money doesn't come from men. You can say that, you want to be single, and people don't think it's a desirability issue, it's a trauma issue, it's an insecurity issue, because what they're looking at is someone that they would think, well, of course men would be attracted to you. You're the one making the choice. Whereas what I've experienced is the same typical, predictable, boring thing of, well, no one wants you anyway, so that's why you have to live this kind of life, which is ironic because men are very easy. I know exactly what aisle in a supermarket to walk down if I wanted a man to show me attention. It's not difficult. Even in this state, it's really not difficult. I can get on a flight to Jamaica, because if you go to Jamaica and not one man talks to you, it's because you're a corpse. So I never take these things personally, because men are easy.
Ladies, you need to go to Jamaica.
Yeah. It's like, come on now, find a man that needs a visa or citizenship anywhere, and you can get a man, people. So he'll tell you he loves you. He'll pretend like he will do all the things. So I think that I often chuckle, because I'm just like, people have just lost the plot on this.
People, I beg to differ though with what you said about, if you looked a certain way, they would take it what you're saying differently. Nobody comes onto TikTok and grows that fast. I mean, it is rare. So whoever is listening is liking and following you, and you've attracted who you're supposed to be attracting. Like, yes, you're not light skin, curly hair, but I mean, still beautiful woman. Like, you see what I'm saying? And I get it, because I get it. I get it. I totally get it, right? And, because sometimes you're looking at people and they're saying a whole lot of nothing. Nothing, I mean, just look what happened with Dr. Bryant when Cheyenne Bryant, when she whatever went down with her. And I don't even really talk about, we kind of touched on it a little bit when I had somebody on the podcast recently, but when darker skinned women try to say something, it's just like there's the facts, and then there are the facts, right? But it's just always got to be.
And you know what, I've always known that women who meet the beauty standard in or outside of the black community, but if you are looking in the black global community, as it were, they have to filter through more nonsense.
Absolutely.
Right? So I've always known that. In actual fact, they have to filter through a lot more nonsense than I do. And so that's not an extra load that I need in my life anyway, because they attract, as everyone does, all types, but at a higher volume. And equally, some of these environments, for example, you look at some of the media outlets that Cheyenne Bryant has gone on, I wouldn't want to be in rooms with some of those people at all, because you can tell that she's a very beautiful woman, and that also means probably men are being unprofessional with her all of the time, despite the fact that she's probably there to share and exchange on something that is substantial. I don't want to have to navigate that all the time, personally. Right? And I think these are some of the realities of meeting the beauty standard and being desirable, as it were, there are all sorts of other caveats that come with that I can't say that I envy or desired for myself.
I think somebody said it. I heard somebody said, when you look a certain way, you're not challenged to, and I'm not saying this because a lot of people are beautiful. This isn't true of everyone, before people say anything, but when you look a certain way, you're not necessarily challenged to create or develop a personality, right? And then at a certain point, that's what you're going to have to lean on when you don't have the youth and you don't have. I think
that's probably more true, in my opinion, when it comes to navigating systems of power, like the corporate workplace. I think that's definitely true when it comes to men. Because if you think about how most men are conditioned and programmed around the utility of a woman, it's not really about her intelligence. That is why you see the most misogynistic of men saying that they don't care about your accomplishments, they don't care about your education. What they care about is your utility as a woman, your womb, the domestic servitude, your sexual availability, and yes, your aesthetic desirability and attraction in their eyes and the men that they want to look at their partner. And so I think for men, your personality doesn't matter very much, because your personality, or your character rather, isn't what feeds those use cases for you as a woman. But you're right, as you age, and even if you're not opting into a relationship with a man, and I think even men who mature eventually realize that having a partner with a character is probably quite helpful. But of course, if they've chosen on the basis of aesthetics and utility only, that is why so many of them tend to be dissatisfied in the long run.
And I'm going to ask you this, because we didn't talk about a coffee no cream moment. We didn't say anything about that, and I just want to know if what you've experienced being, because you're obviously brilliant and on many levels, intelligent, successful, professional. You're a black woman. You're a dark-skinned black woman, which I think it is what it is. It's real, right? It's a true difference walking this earth, I think, in dark skin than it is even in medium brown, light brown skin, right? Light skin. What have you experienced on your journey? Is it, I would say, even in your entrepreneurial journey, or even in content creation, you can say it, like, what have you experienced that you attribute, like any stories or anything that can help people? Because we try to help each other navigate these things, not in a way to complain, but just, because sometimes you think you're crazy, like, you had this happen,
You're not crazy. I mean, I think there's probably this is what has been somewhat of an advantage for me of working for myself for nearly 10 years. Because when you're selling to corporate organizations, it isn't really what you look like. You're doing a lot of direct sales activity, not marketing per se. And that has given me a bit of an edge where I haven't had to worry so much about what I look like, so to speak. Of course, I'll dress presentably and professionally when networking and when going on to client sites. But I would say working for myself has enabled me to be more of myself, because I do corporate work. And the nature of my corporate work is that I'm behind the scenes. I'm enabling senior stakeholders. So I don't even really need to be visible. I am advising them strategically. And so I can kind of hide and be myself. And what they need from me and what they're paying me for is what's in here. So I would say leaving the corporate workplace at the age I did probably helped, right? I'd probably have more unpleasant experiences if I'd stayed in corporate for longer. I would say, obviously, there's the usual things that when I used to go to see clients in person, especially when I had my car, because I love cars, and I've always driven quite big cars in recent years, and I would drive to a client site and they would be like, who are you and why are you here and who are you here to see? They could not fathom that I was there to see anybody in that building, much less the CEO. So there were definitely times when I'd go on site that even the client, because we may only have interacted by email on the phone before, and then I turn up and they're like, oh, you're Ashanti,
right.
And so a lot of those kind of situations of being mistaken for the cleaner, mistaken for a receptionist, when in actual fact I'm the keynote speaker. That kind of stuff happened, I would say, quite a bit when I was in the UK, working in corporate. And then when I went independent, just being mistaken for someone other than I actually am, and knowing it's because of what I look like.
And you just brush it off.
Because you know what? I'm getting paid, Erin.
Yeah.
And one thing about me is I charge properly. So really and truly, I don't mind. It's okay, whatever. Do you know what I mean? When you're in business as well as you've got to keep things ticking over and moving. So I also know I am incredibly good at what I do. I know that I'm in that top 2% when it comes to what I do in corporates, and I get clients' results. They trust me. And so often, even if I'm the second or third option, yeah, when they come back to me, they know why they're coming back to me,
Right,
right?
right.
And so I don't care. I'll sit and make my money. That's the way I always saw it.
I love it.
I think when it comes to content creation, yeah, I think I get a lot of DMs. Most of the time, I have to say, from black women and women of color and black men telling me I'm ugly. That's a big one. They seem to enjoy that quite a lot, actually. DMs and usually in the comments. And like I say, if I was prettier, if I was more aesthetically attractive or pleasing to the eye, I could sit there and say that a man should respect you. And probably people would take it more seriously. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it is what it is.
I just can't understand, that I did a an episode about that and talked about how black women are so mean to each other, and it's just like, what is going on in your head where you would send another black woman with all the stuff we got to deal with anyway,
Yeah.
that you would send her something like that and say something rude. I think a lot of things when I'm scrolling, but I just
Keep scrolling.
keep scrolling. I would never. Sometimes it's like it's right there. I've typed stuff out and then I've just not about people's looks. Just
Yes.
even about like, just I just don't understand that. So it's been a conversation, and it's sad because a lot of black women have they agreed with me, and I was real nervous before I recorded that episode. I was just like,
Yeah.
oh God,
But I get the fact that, we live in a world whereby people want to survive and people want to navigate the systems, and they're going to stack the deck in their favor as much as they can. And beauty and appearance is part of that. And I think for
Yeah.
black women, assimilating as much as possible to either whiteness or what the black community believes to be beautiful is one of the ways you can do that, especially if you are on the dating market and you want to attract a male partner. And if you want to further your career, the way you look matters, the way you present yourself matters. And so obviously women have, internalized that as a lever, as a mechanism that they can pull in order to get to whatever level it is that they want to get
Yeah.
to. So I think since moving here, I see that really acutely. But then when I was in the UK, I didn't fit into all the business, because in some of those business groups, the black women there are got wigs on, makeup, nails done, wearing certain clothes. That's just not my thing. Like, I'm
Yeah.
very much the kind of girl, I love a good thorough shower. I like an everywhere shower. I come out, oil my body up, and then I'll put on some back to front inside out pajamas. Like, I'm super good. Headscarf goes on, I'm good to go. Do you know what I mean? And so I'm really quite laid back in that regard. So I didn't ever really fit into a lot of the black business communities. Obviously, the space I'm in is not beauty. I don't do pop culture. I'm not doing music. I don't act. I'm not in fitness. So in a way, sometimes there isn't really a space for me in a lot of black business communities and black creative communities sometimes, because that's not the space that I'm in.
Well, you're definitely carving your own way out because you are doing amazing. I want to give you the opportunity to share what you've got going on, because I know you've got the community, I know you've got courses, you got the stuff. So I want to give you the opportunity to talk about it, because I think it could be life changing for many women.
I think some of the most important things that I do is writing on the Substack and then the longer form videos on YouTube. And so I would encourage people to kind of engage in that, really. If you like reading, on the Substack, I talk about, what it means to be an unpunishable woman, the single woman economy and what that looks like for us as single women with money. And then obviously there's YouTube if you prefer kind of audio and longer form video.
Are you still doing I know you had a sales course, you had...
Yeah, we had so much fun. Over 100 women,
Oh,
single
wow.
women from all over the world. I taught them how to sell for 6 weeks. That was fantastic. Such a lovely experience. So yeah, we do have some digital products, but as I say, I think most of the framework stuff, definitely Substack and YouTube.
Okay. Well, awesome. This has been awesome. And I'm gonna have her back because I've got some ideas and some plans. So I'm just so excited that we finally caught up with each other and you could come on. I'm very impressed with you. I have been
Yeah,
since the
thank
first
you.
video that I ever saw. So I'm like, this girl, she's got something. She's got something. Something obviously people are feeling your energy because you're doing good. Good. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much, Ashanti, for coming and sitting and talking with me today. And we're going to see you here again. So
Thank you.
thanks so much, guys. And we'll see you on the next episode.